never walked away from time in prayer or time reading the Bible or time with Jesus in general regretting it. Just because you're following Jesus and is your number one priority does not mean life's going to be easier, but your purpose will be clearer.
Welcome to the Holy and Healthy Podcast, a podcast to help each of us live out the life that God has called us to live. If you enjoyed this podcast or today's episode, please leave us a review and share it with others. We hope you enjoy our conversation today.
You're listening to Holy and Healthy. My name is Hunter Perry, and I am here with a guest and a friend, Shane Elledge. How you doing, Shane?
Dude, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming to sit down, bro.
Yeah.
Dude, we just recently had you in Young Adults last Thursday.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah?
It was a good time, man.
How was it teaching to young adults than middle schoolers? How is that different?
Well, number one, it's a lot more quiet. I'm used to just sound everywhere.
Right.
And then second, it's just a completely different environment. I mean, like I'm looking around and everyone's eyes are on me. And usually when I'm looking around, it's like they're messing with soda. They're like poking each other and like, so it's just different. But it was a lot of fun.
Oh, you didn't see that happen on Thursday? Oh, you weren't seeing all the poking and
no, I didn't see any of that.
Yeah.
I know.
No, I don't know how much is happening. Well, dude, thanks for taking a sec to hop on Holy and Healthy with me to chat through some stuff. Our audience, again, they had you on Thursday, but they might not fully know who you are. So could you kind of, in just a little bit of time, kind of share a little bit of how you kind of got on the couch today, how you kind of got in your role today, how in life, just, I don't know, it's packaged in a lot, but yeah, kind of explain like how has God worked in your life till this point? Yeah,
well, so I grew up in Washington State. That's where I lived for like the first 22 years of my life. And first, from kindergarten through 8th grade, I went to a private Christian school. There it was like the smallest school ever. Like we had 60 kids in my middle school, 16 in just my 8th grade class. And then from there, they didn't go up to high school. And so I went to a public high school. And there at the public high school, I went from 16 kids in my grade to 400 kids in my grade. And that was like...
That's a lot.
Yeah, it was a huge culture shock for sure. And with that... so I went to a public high school. I still grew up in church, and I went to church for the first, from my entire life, all the way through my senior year. But then my parents moved to California. And so right when I turned 18, I graduated high school, my parents moved, and then it was just me, like with my friends, the ones that stayed back from college, and that's kind of where the next 4 years of my life happened, where I realized that the choices I made of going to church and growing up Christian wasn't necessarily my choice. Like, I still loved it, and I loved growing up that way, but I had never made that decision fully for myself. And so for those next 4 years, I hadn't stepped foot in church once. But with that, the year I turned 21, I was just scrolling on social media one day and saw a video about reading the Bible and how when we read the Bible, like, starting at 4 times a week, like your mood just changes. All these different statistics of depression going down, anxiety going down, all these things. And in this moment, I just felt stuck. And I was like, this could be the moment where like, I need to go back to God. Like I grew up that way. What can I do to get close with him again? And so I started reading the Bible, and instantly like my mind it shifted. Kind of opened up this whole new like, man, everything I had been doing differently and wrong and the choices I made. And I was like, I got to give my life to God. And so I did, and found out my parents were moving to Arizona. I was like, okay, maybe this is kind of God telling me that I need to make a change in my life. And so I moved here with them in September of 2022. And I said, whatever church I go to, I'm going to serve, and I'm going to make it my home. And I went to the sneak peek tour here at Rock Point. It was the first church I visited. And I was like, I'm going to make this my church home. Went to sneak peek tour. That's where I met Carly. And she talked about middle school. It's like, okay, maybe that's it. I'll serve in middle school.
Yeah.
And that's just where my life like completely switched from, okay, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I'm just here. God, where do you want me? to, I think ministry is what I'm supposed to do, and specifically youth ministry. And so I told Caleb and Carly, who were the middle school director and assistant director at the time, that I wanted to intern. And now here I am. I interned last year, and some things moved around. Carly became the director, and then I'm now the assistant director of middle school. So
That's so cool, man.
I know it's super weird, like thinking back to like 2 years ago to now,
Yeah.
and just I never would have thought that this is where I'd be.
Yeah, especially when you go through a hiatus of being away from church for 4 years, and then you come back with such a full force of like, I'm reading my Bible because I saw a video on TikTok,
Literally,
and then now you're like, you started serving and then interning and now hired, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
So like, what about that? I'm kind of just jumping straight in, but what about that to you? Like, sort of like blows your mind from where you are today. What would Shane during those 4 years not believe about your life today? Like, to me, it seems so drastically different, and not in any bad ways. It's just it's a really cool story.
Yeah.
Does it like surprise you at all that you're like kind of here?
Yes and no. Like it surprises me that I'm in ministry and that I'm working at a church. And like for me, I always thought I was going to be in California. That's where I was going to end up, and just making movies. Like that was like, I wanted to be the video guy.
Oh yeah.
And so that was kind of my passion, is being behind the camera, doing things like that. And then, but I've always had a heart for the next generation. Even just, I worked at the YMCA in Seattle and taught sports to middle schoolers and elementary kids. And so that part doesn't surprise me, that like I'm in a job where I'm with the next generation.
That makes sense, yeah.
But I never thought I'd work at a church. Like that's what's weird about it.
Yeah. From wanting your whole life to be behind the camera, directing, watching a story unfold, to now being in front, telling the stories, maybe to the same audience, but no, that's super cool though.
Yeah.
And it's so rad to see how God takes our lives in different directions than we thought we would, but also keeps us a little bit in our sweet spots too.
Totally, yeah.
Like, you wanted to be a part of, you always loved the next generation, but never knew you'd be working in church. God, it's just a really cool story. So thanks again for
of course,
sharing that. I've got a couple of questions for you, specifically because you're working in church, you're working with youth, you're also a young adult living in today's society, and our culture today is so different than I think any ones that we've seen before, with the just nuance and just ability of social media, and just kind of where just relative truth in culture has gone. So I'd love to ask you a couple of questions, just
for sure.
how you navigate some of those things, the highs and lows of all of those, and just kind of, that was kind of a bar, the highs and lows of all of those.
Dude, let's go.
Call me Kendrick Lamar. But I'm gonna ask you a few questions, and would just love to hear your input. So obviously our culture has a lot of competing messages about truth and identity and where we land on those. So how do you, in the midst of growing up in Washington State, which has a completely different political view than maybe Arizona does, and just culture subset, so how do you like ground yourself in not, sway off of what you fully believe, even when you might run into people that don't always see the world the same as you?
Yeah.
So how do you do that? Because I know anybody listening, they don't, majority probably aren't working at church, probably maybe don't always have the Christians around them. So how do you navigate that when you're like, I believe this, but I'm kind of interacting with people that don't believe this? How do you navigate those tensions?
Yeah, I think, well, going back to those 4 years, I think that was a huge thing, is that even though I grew up Christian, the biggest, what it came down to was it wasn't my choice. And I think for a lot of us, we have to make that decision of, okay, this faith, like the faith in Jesus and me being a follower of Christ, like that is my choice. And I think we have to decide that for ourselves first. And once we make that decision and we're like, okay, this is our faith, it's not our parents, it's not our friends, that already in itself will be a huge like jump ahead. Like that's where your security comes in.
Yeah.
Because that is so true. Like where, I mean, growing up in Seattle, it is a different. There's so many different views and what people believe, and so since it wasn't necessarily my choice, I was kind of getting mixed ideas and hearing what other people thought, and I was like, oh yeah, maybe that's the case. But once it was my choice, the next step was getting to really just know the truth. Right. So like if truth and identity being grounded in that, we have to know the truth. And once we know it, then it's harder to change that. And that's the thing is people they don't know Jesus fully a lot of the times, especially non-believers. Like they'll hear things and they'll say things about Jesus, but if you actually read the Bible and get to know him for yourself, then you'll be able to stand up against that and just be like, oh, that's not Jesus. Right. Like you can kind of just be like, no, that's not true. But if you don't know who he is and you're not in the word and reading the Bible, then you might hear something even on TikTok and be like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. And you might believe it. So I think that's just really important, is just like making sure it's your choice and then getting to know the one that you're following.
Yeah, absolutely. So for you, what was that moment where it was like, I know reading your Bible and that TikTok like was big for you, but what was that moment where you like, what did the choice look like? What did it look like when you were like, or kind of walk me through, did you have a moment where you were like, I'm just done feeling this way? Or like, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, that looked like, I remember when I started reading the Bible again, it was, I opened the book of Matthew, and I don't remember how far I got in, but that choice of like, I was reading it and it looked like almost, have you ever seen That's So Raven?
Yeah.
There's this, like whenever she has a vision, her eyes get super big
Yeah.
and she like turns to the side. That's kind of what it looked like, but not that dramatic, like.
If there's a camera in your room.
Yeah, like it was like, I was like, whoa, okay, this is like, it just started hitting me.
Yeah.
It was just this realization of, man, there's so much more that Jesus has to offer than the world has to offer. And it kind of just, I don't think I got super emotional or anything. It was just more of that realization and kind of opening my eyes to everything that's in the Bible and what he has to offer.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
It's like opposite of what, being from the South, a lot of the teaching can be this like fire and brimstone, like turn away before the coming of the Lord and stuff, which is true. But it's cool that like what awed you and captivated you back was the like, look at what I have for you.
Yeah.
If you read my word, like obviously you won't feel these things. And so that's cool that you fell back in love with him and his word because of what he has for you, not necessarily because what he hasn't. He's not like asked you to do. Like he's not like, don't do these things, and you're like, I'm on board with that. It's more like, oh, you love me and you care for me.
Yeah.
So that's really cool, man.
Yeah.
I love hearing that. When you talk about this video that came across TikTok, I think it's so cool that we have this new tool of being able to reach people for Jesus. Do you remember who it was?
No, and I wish I did. Like, I didn't save the video, anything like that. Like, I just remember some dude, blue background. Like, that's all I remember.
Background. Yeah. And honestly, I don't know if it matters.
Yeah.
It would have been cool if you did know.
I know that would have.
But I think for your like testimony in the way, it's kind of okay because it almost puts the more emphasis that God used it for you.
Yeah.
And I think what's so cool about social media, regardless of how you might see it in your own personal way, like it's such just a net casting way to just show people Jesus, which I think is like sometimes Instagram and TikTok, like, it can get a bad rap, and for genuinely good reasons.
Yeah.
But I think the cool part of it is we can take it and use it for good ways. How have you, one, from receiving a TikTok that God used, how have you kind of navigated the the waters of social media in a way to have a positive and good outlook on it instead of one that is kind of normative throughout our culture today, at least with some older generations of like, it's terrible, it's the worst, you know. How have you kind of navigated through, no, this actually kind of helped, kind of like saved my life a little bit.
Yeah.
So how have you navigated through those?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It does. Social media has its pros and cons for sure.
Yeah.
The healthy side from it is like it's the thing we have to realize is that social media is going to be a part of life. Like no matter how many times we say, oh, it can be bad for us, all that, like it will be a part of our life, and especially this next generation. Like this is a part of their culture now, growing up with social media. And so just meeting them
Yeah,
where
they don't know anything different.
Yeah. And so like meeting them where they're at, like that's kind of my story is like I was caught up on social media, just always scrolling, and it's God met me where I was at in that moment through a video that someone just posted. And so I think that's really the healthy side of it, is being that light in wherever you're at, and that is on social media too. And so I think realizing that and being like, okay, it's not all cons and negatives, and there is a positive side to it, and we need to feed the positive side more, because the more that we can, instead of just being like, oh, we're not, and this is okay, because there's some people that can't be on social media. They know that for themselves, and they're like, I'm going to take a break. That's great. If you decide to be on social media, it's like, start being a light, start posting something, even if it's just like, I'm at church today, come to Rock Point, like come to my church. But for me personally, I think it's just setting boundaries also. And even just like go through who you follow. Like I remember you guys talked about that on when you talked about social media on one of your episodes, where it's like who you follow matters.
Yeah.
Like what are you feeding yourself? What are you looking at? And so, yeah, go through your following list. Like see who's on there. Like it could be celebrities that you don't need to follow. At least, start following some church accounts or something. Like that's helped me, just following different pastors and seeing what they post. So then it's like, okay, if I get caught up in scrolling, and then eventually something's going to pop up where it's like,
Yeah.
it's about Jesus, and it brings me back.
No, that's good, man.
Yeah.
So you mentioned in there the like influence that social media has on the younger generations. And I think for you, even in what you just said, you making sure that you're following the right people, so that you, when you're scrolling, when we all doom scroll. So when we're like doom scrolling, eventually we hit a pastor that it's like, all right, cool, I got something out of this, and maybe I can feel like I can finally close out after like 30 minutes of scrolling.
Literally, yeah.
But you mentioned that the youth of just today, the influence of social media is so big. As you're working with them, and when your demographic is what, like 11 to 14-year-olds, primarily that 6th to 8th graders. How have you seen the impact and influence of social media, and outside of just Instagram? Because they don't hop on to Instagram or TikTok because it's Instagram or TikTok, because it's people, right?
Yeah.
So how have you seen like the influence of that kind of culture play out in the middle schoolers? Can you kind of like help anybody listening, like, just kind of see what that looks like?
Yeah, I think with social media in this next generation, it's made things just so much more accessible for them, where they're now getting used to just quick content. And what I mean by that is like, yeah, we can have a sermon and a message, and some will pay attention, some might not, but what they'll really take away is those short, catchy phrases, like the big idea. What verses can they take on their phone? It's things that they can have with them and they can go back to. That's quick. So we'll see. Like you could have the entire room not listening, but the moment a verse pops up, you see all their phones come out and take a photo. The big idea comes out, they take their phones out, take a photo. And so I think for them, it's really just what can they go back to? What things are those little things that you can give them. Like we have gospel cards and we have verse cards that are physical that they can grab, they can take home with them, and it's like that's the quick, accessible content. And I think that's for all of us too. Really, like we're just getting so used to 30-second videos that I've even found like watching movies can be tough sometimes because I'm
Yeah.
like, it's so long, and I'm used to quick now, and like what can I get faster? So that's the biggest thing I would say.
Quick, accessible content. Like that is just such a fascinating idea.
Yeah.
Like the 30-second type, bro. We're turning into goldfish, bro. Like 3-second time spans in our head.
For real.
But I feel that way, especially about movies. Like you and I and Carly and Rito, we went and watched a movie. We went and watched Wicked.
Yeah, we did.
And it's like 2.5-hour movie, and usually I'm good with those, but like the middle hour, I was just so bored. And it's a fantastic movie. Like, there's nothing wrong with that middle hour, but I was just like sitting there like, dang. But also it's because if I would have chosen, I probably would have chosen to watch like Gladiator 2.
That one looks good too.
It looks good, but
It does.
that's just my
Yeah.
let's like see some swords clashing,
Yeah.
But no, for real, like there's something with that like quick content stuff. It's like it's gotta be like moving and moving. But
Yeah.
it's cool that you guys recognize that. Like you and Carly have put out these gospel cards. You have met them where they are at. And I think that's the cool part that you guys are understanding, and even that you just said, is for you, someone met you where you are by posting a video. And you guys are meeting the middle schoolers where they are by these quick things where it's like, throw a big idea up that they'll remember. Don't make the sermon too complicated.
Yeah.
Make it really practical. Make it really easy. And then let's give you some resources to take home. I think those are so big for our youth today.
Yeah, for sure.
As you've watched the youth not just be influenced by social media, but by friends and by other people and by the things that you guys are doing, you've been now around this generation at the YMCA back in Washington, and then now here in middle school for 2 years. As you've been watching, I know some people sometimes can have a negative view on the generation that are following them. That's just every generation.
Yeah.
This is not a new concept where, the baby boomers at one point were looked down on by their grandparents. And so it's always that way. And so for people who tend to look at, the latter half of Gen Z and Gen Alpha in a way where it's like, the future is ruined. Like, what would you say to them by the things that you've seen and you've witnessed and you listen to, where it's like, it doesn't like freak you out. It actually excites you what God is doing. What's one or two of those things that you've seen that it's like, no, the hope is not lost. It's like hope is actually being found.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is with these middle schoolers and high schoolers, at least at Rock Point, because that's the context that I'm in, is I get to see the youth at Rock Point. They are hungry.
Yeah.
And they are amazing leaders, and they want to lead, and they want to share with their friends about Jesus. I mean, we have what's awesome about middle school specifically is that we get to also have high school leaders, and they are, like, probably half our leaders are high schoolers, and I love that because it's like, even though they're still in the youth ministry as a whole, they get to be in a different light than they are on Sunday nights. When they come on a Wednesday, they're now leaders, and we get to see them grow and build that connection with the younger generation, like the younger ones than them. And the middle schoolers, I mean, we do this thing called Youth Crew. And this year, it's just grown so much. And with Youth Crew, it's a lot of 8th graders and 7th graders. And they just serve, and they're there, and they have the best time. And they're hungry for that. They're hungry to help people. And they have a lot of questions. And I think that's one of the most encouraging things, because they don't show up and are like, I don't want to know things. And I think we can think that because it's like, oh, they're not listening to me, or, oh, they're on their phone. But if you actually talk to middle schoolers, they just start asking questions.
Yeah.
And that's the coolest thing, is because we can't just like see what we see on the outside and think that they don't care. Because when we show that we care and we're like, hey, like, just what's your name?
Mm.
What brought you here today? They just start asking. I think of this one seventh grader who he was waiting for his mom to get picked up. And this was recently, and if you would have seen him in service, you would have thought that, like, oh, he just distracts other people, blah blah blah, and that's the kind of mindset I think a lot of people can get in. But I went and sat with him, and he just started asking me questions of like, so like, Jesus is God? And that's right away I knew, okay, so he wants to know more. Like he heard something and he's might be a little confused, and then he just kept asking questions. And that's the coolest thing to me. I think that's so encouraging that like they just want to know.
They do.
Yeah.
They're hungry not even just at church. I feel like they are hungry even in all the other environments too. So what do you think makes like middle school a place where they feel free to ask questions?
I think
And maybe the people at middle school. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing that's really cool about middle school is the culture there is like it's an invite culture of where they feel already like they want to invite their friends. And so that community of, okay, we have, because we do communities, and so we that's after our service, and then they go and they have this more intimate time where it's like a smaller group, and I think because of that and inviting friends and all that, like I think it just makes it feel safer for them, where they feel like they can ask these questions because they don't feel judged, and no matter who they are or how they come in, like. Sure, there might be some other middle schoolers that judge them and like, you know, they're middle schoolers. They're going to say things to each other.
Right.
But we have such amazing leaders that I think no matter how they show up or what they look like or what they do or what they say, we'll show them love. And we'll show them like, hey, ask any question you have. You won't be judged. And I think that's big. Like I think the moment somebody feels judged, they don't want to keep asking questions.
Yeah.
It's like if you've ever asked a question in class and everyone laughs.
Like, bro, that was a dumb question.
Yeah, you're like, well, dude, I'm never gonna ask a question again. And so I think creating that culture of ask away, we'll answer we don't have all the answers, but we'll answer the best that we can.
Yeah, creating like a safe place for them to be themselves and ask all the questions is that is so big because it creates more hunger.
Yeah.
Like it's like when you get a little taste of food and you're hungry, it's like, oh, I'm gonna eat more.
Yeah.
I'm gonna eat more. But if you get the fork knocked out of your hand, it's like, well, I'm probably gonna go get it and eat more.
Yeah.
Like, no, that's really cool. Is that something that you feel like has been natural for you to create those spaces? Do you feel like you're naturally like, ask me anything? Or do you think that's something you've had to learn in the last couple of years?
No, I love that. I love when people feel comfortable enough to come up to me and ask me anything. Like, I think that was huge for me just in my faith and my walk with God is having those people that are older and not feeling judged. Because the moment that I feel judged, I like by somebody older than me, I do put a wall up. And so, like I have, his name's Markel, and he was from my church growing up. And he's someone who was there my senior year of high school. And there's something about him where he never judged anybody. Like I felt it, felt like I could tell him anything. And when I got hired on staff, I texted him again. And he's the person I'll tell, like, if I'm struggling with things or anything, like, he's the person I go to still. And that's from high school.
That's
like,
cool.
Just because he always had this almost, I was going to say aura, I guess.
I mean, it works.
Yeah. Where it's like
Gen Z has stolen the word from us.
I know.
But no,
Where it's like, ask me anything, I'll help you and I won't judge you. And so I love being able to do that for other people.
That's cool. That was one of the reasons I asked is because usually we try to create the spaces that we feel most comfortable in. So that's cool that you've had that and you feel like you create that for people.
Yeah.
Because then naturally you'll be able to create it for others as well.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the hardest parts of being in like the Gen Z, Gen Alpha age ranges. So if anyone who doesn't know, like Gen Alpha is 16 and below, and Gen Z is like 17 up to 29, I think now. So yeah, those navigating those anger ranges is hard. But I think one of the hardest things about being in those is finding those safe places. I think one of the reasons why we see demographics like, you know, LGBTQ and just other kind of movements in culture be so not even just eye opening, but almost like championing is because at least there they feel known and accepted and supported at least.
Totally.
And I think it's so big that we create safe spaces. I think that's one of the things that faces Gen Z and Gen Alpha. But working with them, being a young adult in Gen Z, what's another big tough challenge that you feel like you face to on like the day to day, where it's like maybe people don't understand how hard it is, or maybe people do, but it's just what's one of those toughest things that you feel like you kind of have to walk through?
Yeah, I think for me, and I think a lot of people, the biggest thing would be comparison. And I think that comes with wherever you work, whatever you're doing, there's always people you compare yourself to. And even just, I mean, like being in ministry, it's like you see all these, there's so many pastors, there's so many things, and it's like I can see someone who just knows Bible verses off the top of their head. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I wish I could just recite all these verses word for word. Like I'll compare myself to them, but it's like I'm at such a more, like they're just at a more mature pace or life than me, and like they're older, they've done this longer, things like that. And so I think comparison is a big one, especially with social media, right? Like we're scrolling, we see other people's a snapshot of somebody's life, and we compare, and so that's huge. And I think that just comes through identity. That's a big thing we're also looking at in youth, is just who people are. The world is telling everybody who you are and who you're supposed to be, and so that's huge for youth. That's huge for the next generation of just, no, this is who the world is going to tell you to be, but this is who Jesus says you are. And being able to guide everybody back to that lane. And that's kind of something I have to remember for myself, is like, no, this is who I think I should be, and the world is telling me I should be, but like, this is what I am supposed to be. This is my identity in Jesus. And that's been huge for me too. But yeah, comparison is, I think, a big problem.
No, that's a really good answer. Comparison and identity is so big, and I feel like it always has been. But today, so much so with social media and whatnot.
Yeah.
I asked that really to ask one for people listening to know, but how do you feel like the church can come alongside young adults and youth in the midst of comparison and identity and other challenges that they might have? How do you feel like the church can function to help like our ages?
Yeah, I think a big one personally for would be going back to that judgment of like having people that can walk with you without feeling like you're going to be judged. And that's not even, I mean, really not even just for older people, but like community. I think the more that we push having community at church, having those friends who also believe in the same God as you and have the same vision as you and mission, is huge. I mean, that's a big thing for me. Like I love my Seattle friends, and where I grew up, but I didn't have a lot of friends that went to church. And now being here, I have a lot of friends that also work at the church. Like it's just a different, it's completely changed my life. Just being able to have friends that are able to almost walk with me in community, and like we're all walking with God. We're all doing these things together. And so that's big. I think having that, pushing community, pushing groups.
Yeah. So having people that are walking through life with you, but then having someone that you can kind of like, here's life right now. It's terrible. It sucks. And for them to be like, oh yeah, I get it. Like you're good.
Yeah.
Like, do you feel like that's like the big, not that I'm like saying anything bad about the church, but like just in general, do you feel like if we were to have that piece of like organic mentorship, life would find itself to be a little bit easier to navigate?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's always this gravitation, at least for me, to someone older.
Mm-hmm.
That like they just there's something about it. I mean, with they're wiser most of the time too. Like someone who's older, like they have wisdom to give. They've lived through life, that are in a different stage of life than you. I think having that organic mentorship of just it also makes you feel seen and it makes you feel wanted when it's like there's someone that's older than you that wants to pour into you. There's that I like it just feels like, oh, they actually care about me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's big.
Yeah. If I have someone who's like, yeah, like I get it. I've been there. I've walked through this.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just at least makes you feel like you're not crazy.
Yeah.
That's what's been helpful for me when I have someone who's older. If I'm like walking through something that's really hard and I just tell them and it's like, hey, I've been there. I get it. Like, you're going to be okay. I think that's all you need
Yeah.
to hear. Like, you're going to be okay. I think, like, in today, we have so many things that can just grap, that's not even a word. I said like grapple and grip in my head and combined them. But, like, we have so many things that in life that I just don't think we ever have. And they can feel so overwhelming, whether it's just
Mm-hmm.
anxiety or even just like feeling burnout of work, or just like uncertainty about the future. And it would be nice to be able to process that with someone who was older. And so if you're listening to this, like if you have someone who's older, like pour your life out to them if they're a safe person.
Yeah.
But if you don't, at least at Rockpoint, we'll help you find someone like that. But when you find yourself in situations where maybe you are feeling anxiety or you're kind of uncertain about the future or you're feeling like I'm just tired. I'm just feel like yeah, I'm burning myself out. What are some practices and things that you might do to help yourself out in those types of scenarios?
Yeah, I think the a big thing is reminding myself I'm not in control. And I'm not like necessarily this controlling person at all. I like to go with the flow, but when it comes to my life, there's obviously things that I want, and there's things that's like, man, I wish this would happen. And so just reminding myself, like, okay, I'm not in control, and I have to give time to the one that is.
Yeah.
Right. Like I have to really just have faith in Jesus and say, okay, I got to trust that whatever is going on in my life, I trust you with that. And some practices would be, I think rest is really important. That's something that I am not the best at, but when I do it, I feel miles better. Like that's a practice I do want to get better at is not the kind of rest that's laziness, but the kind of rest where I'm with
It's
God.
like rest for your soul. Yeah.
Yeah, where I actually refuel. And I think that's so important to, especially in a job like this, where we're pouring out so much, we have to fill ourselves back up. And so that's something that I've been learning this year. Really just giving time to God, whether that's prayer, whether that's reading the Bible or a devotional, things like that.
No, that's really cool, man. I love that you said the first thing that you said was realizing we're not in control. I think that one of the hardest things that we forget to remember is in the midst of all of the crazy is that we're not in control.
Yeah.
We do try to control everything. And for me, yeah, I usually have to get to the place where I'm forced to remember that I'm not in control because I try to control all the things.
Yeah.
And then when I can't control it, it's like God's like, hey, like knocking on my window, like you can't control it. Like I'm here.
Yeah.
Which is so rad that you're like, yeah, I just have to. Like I just have to do that. When you find yourself in those scenarios and you're focusing back on God, for the person who's kind of in the middle of it and they're like they can't shake this part of life, what would you say to that person who's having a hard time focusing on God in the midst of the storm and whatever they might be going through? What do you feel like is like the biggest and best part of Jesus being like your number one focus? What is that for you where you're like, I get so much out of this? How can you describe that?
Yeah, I think, well, one thing is I have never walked away from time in prayer or time reading the Bible or time with Jesus in general, regretting it. And I think we can, with distractions and when Jesus isn't our priority, we can do things and we can almost have regret afterward of like, man, I just played video games for a couple hours. Man, I just watched TV for a couple hours. I was on my phone, or I did these things. And I've walked away from those situations feeling like, my day I didn't really do much today.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing is like, I've never done that with God. I've never had that moment. And so recognizing that, it's like also realizing, okay, just because you're following Jesus and is your number one priority does not mean life's going to be easier, but your purpose will be clearer. And I think that's huge, because when Jesus becomes your number one priority, it's almost like you start to get 20/20 vision of like, okay, I'm not in control, but I can see where you're taking me. I can see, okay, this is why you want me to do these things. And it's almost like your purpose of just what you're supposed to do. And your purpose doesn't have to be your job. Like, it's just, man, my purpose is to be here, to love other people, and to spend time with God. Like, it just becomes clearer to you. And I think that was huge. Like with my story, life didn't get easier, but my purpose got clearer. Like I started to see, okay, this is what God wants me to do. Okay, I'll move. Okay, I'll serve. Okay, I'll intern. Okay, now I'm working here. Like, it's just all these things, just these doors, different doors open than expected.
I love what you said. I don't know if you came up with it or you stole it from somebody, but like life doesn't get easier, your purpose gets clearer. Did you just drop that bar? Or?
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy, bro.
I know.
That's
I
good.
thought of it earlier.
Nice. That's really good.
Thanks.
The quote that always pops up in my head is that vision gives pain purpose. And so if you have like the idea of something that's greater, you can walk through pain with purpose, knowing that something's greater on the other side of it. So that makes a lot of sense. Like, it doesn't makes it necessarily mean that life gets easier, but your purpose is clearer. It's easier to see.
Yeah.
So with your story that you just mentioned like a few seconds ago, you've tracked us through. Now at middle school, we've talked a little bit about it. And now you're talking about, how do I keep Jesus number one focus? In the midst of all of that, man, what would you say to someone who's sitting here listening to this and is sort of still on the fence of like, I just don't feel like I can give Jesus like 100% of who I am. Like I can give him Sundays and I can give him like some of my priorities, but I can't fully dive in. What would be your encouragement and challenge to that person that's like, I don't really know, but I'm kind of feeling like maybe I should?
Yeah, I would say, one, I understand. Like, I get it. Like, that's that control side of, I don't know if I can give him that full control. And it can be a difficult decision for some people. And what I would say is, well, number one, it's 100% worth it. I think there's a lot of people that would say that too. And if you can't do it yet, try it. Maybe give yourself like one day where it's like, okay, I'll give God control this day. Instead of doing these things, I'll read the Bible. I will pray. I will just see one day what it's like if I gave him full control. It's like a trial, you know? Try it out, see what you think, and I think you'll feel more filled up than you ever have, even in one day. And so just try it. If you're on the fence, what's one day gonna hurt? You know?
Yeah, that's so good. What's one day?
Yeah,
out of the midst of 365.
360. Yeah, life goes fast.
Yeah,
and so I mean, one day could be taken up by doing nothing, or it could be taken up just by being with God.
Yeah, and Jesus only really needs one moment.
Yeah.
You know, just give me like one real moment of you just giving all of it to me.
Totally.
He loves proving himself to people. So yeah, if you're listening and you're sitting in that, moment of like, I don't really know. Yeah, just do what Shane said. Just try it.
Just try it.
Yeah, see how it goes. Well, bro, thanks for sitting with me today. I love hearing your wisdom and insights on life. You're a wise dude. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, thank you. I don't know it. That's the thing. Like, I just think of
Yeah, you just think of bars and you're just like, yeah, I'll just, write that down for my rap later.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're a freestyler.
It's true. Back in the day.
Yeah. Well, dude, thanks for hopping on. I do have 5 questions for you.
Okay.
So these are meant to be answered within about 5 minutes. So whatever comes to your head, just go with it. This will help me and people listening get to know you
Okay.
just a little bit better. So the first one, what's one of the most unexpected things a middle schooler has said to you on a Wednesday night?
Unexpected. One of the most ruthless things a middle schooler has said to me is, and this was unexpected, they asked me if I had chicken pox because I had zits on my face.
Bro,
So that humbled me.
that's crazy, dude.
It was I was done so dirty.
That's so wild.
I know.
Bro, middle schoolers,
They're-
they'll just bring out all your insecurities.
They will.
That is
it's
crazy.
It's a humbling ministry.
I've never heard you say that.
I think I didn't want to say it. Like I just
Bro, that's
I know.
crazy. All right, we'll move on. I don't want you to sit in that anymore. If you could master any skill, what would it be?
oh, oh my gosh, from a leadership standpoint, probably like communicating and just getting more confident in that. But honestly, I would love to be able to do card magic.
There you go.
Yep, be a
Both
magician.
would be dope.
Yep,
Well, you need communicating to do card magic.
that's true.
So, card magic would be sick. All right,
Would.
this was a fun one I thought of when I wrote it down. If you could relive one moment from your life for the very first time again, what would it be?
Okay, I would want to relive my sophomore year.
Okay.
2 seconds left on the clock. I was playing basketball.
Okay.
And my coach at the time wrote out a play. We're down by, literally think 1 point. Wrote out a play for all the other 4 guys. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? You didn't say anything to me. And he's like, just stand here. We go in. Someone shoots the shot really quick. It bounces off the rim. I catch it, put it up for a layup, game winner.
Dang.
I know, dude. It was crazy.
That is crazy.
That was peak for me.
That's rad. Buzzer beaters are sick. That is a crazy moment.
I know, because I literally was just like, he was just like, I don't know, stand there. I was like, cool.
Bro, that was like your High School Musical 3 moment.
It was.
Yeah, I don't need to go into how much you love High School Musical, but I thought I'd drop it in.
Don't do that.
If you could choose one song to be your theme song, what would it be?
You already know, Defying Gravity by Wicked.
Bro, stop.
It's my new theme song.
Stop, dude. No.
I love it.
Give me a real answer.
Man, I don't even know. That's such a good one. I just feel like I'm thinking Justin Bieber songs.
I mean, that's okay. Like One Less Lonely Girl.
As Long as You Love Me.
Okay.
Jesus, as long as you love me.
Okay. Yeah. Please don't sing that song to
That's
him.
all I need.
Okay. Last question, decently more serious. What's a piece of advice that you wish you knew when you were younger that you'd like to tell people listening?
I think one of the biggest things for me is that time moves fast. And I'm 24. I can think back to when I was 18 like it was yesterday. And it just, the amount of things that I put off and we're like, oh, I can do that another day. I can do that tomorrow. I can do that next month. I think just have caught up to me. Like it's do them now, where you're at right now, the things that you want to get done. Trust me, because it's like, they say that even just like fitness takes 90 days, right? To have that transformation in fitness, 90 days goes by so fast. But when you're in day 1, it feels like forever.
Yeah.
And so just things like that, whatever you want to do it, because you're going to get to that future point and wish you did.
Yeah. Dude, that's so good. Well, bro, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Dude, thanks
I
for having
appreciate
me.
you, and thank you for teaching on Thursday.
It was so much fun. Loved it.
Well, we'll have to have you back on the pod and in the room.
Love to.
Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. Well, Anthony Edwards is the GOAT. Thank you so
Amen.
much for spending time. I only said that for you. Russell Westbrook is my GOAT. But
Stop.
all right, man. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.